My sister-in-law faked being abused by me to get my husband to divorce me. A year later she stole his house and left him homeless. I, 28F, need to vent about the crazy situation I'm dealing with right now. I've been married to my husband Jeremy, 32M, for 4 years. We met through mutual friends at a college reunion party and dated for 2 years before getting married. Our relationship was amazing during the dating period. Jeremy was caring, supportive, and always put me first. His family also seemed to like me back then, especially his sister Elaine, 25F, who was always excited to hang out with me. The problem started about 6 months ago when Elaine moved in with Jeremy's parents. Her husband Mark works in Singapore as a software developer. His work visa doesn't allow him to bring his spouse, and his salary isn't enough to afford living with Elaine there. She was really upset about this situation and Jeremy suggested she live with their parents in the house he owns instead of staying alone. I supported this decision because I understood how hard it must be for her to be away from her husband. For the first few months, everything was fine. Elaine and I would often cook together when I visited, and she would share stories about her relationship with Mark. She seemed grateful for the support. But things changed dramatically when she found out she was pregnant 3 months ago. At first, everyone was excited about the pregnancy. Jeremy's parents, Nolan and Patricia, were over the moon about becoming grandparents. But Elaine's behavior towards me started changing. She began finding faults with everything I did. If I helped Patricia with household chores, Elaine would make snide remarks about how I was trying to show off. If I didn't help, she would complain to everyone about how inconsiderate I was. Things got really bad when she started accusing me of copying her style. Once, I wore a loose-fitting dress to their house because it was hot outside. Elaine had a complete meltdown, crying about how I was mocking her pregnancy by wearing maternity-style clothes. I tried explaining that it was just a regular dress, but she wouldn't listen. She ran to her room sobbing, and Patricia gave me dirty looks all evening. I talked to Jeremy about these incidents multiple times. I explained how Elaine's behavior was making me uncomfortable and affecting my mental health. But Jeremy always defended her, saying she was emotional because of the pregnancy and being away from Mark. He asked me to be more understanding and not take her comments personally. I tried, I really did, but it only got worse. Last month, Elaine started telling everyone that I made mean comments about her marriage. She claimed I told her that Mark probably took the overseas job to get away from her. This was completely false. In fact, Elaine was the one who often made hurtful comments about my marriage, saying things like at least her husband wasn't a mama's boy like Jeremy, or that at least Mark had real ambitions unlike Jeremy who just inherited his dad's business. Despite her constant attacks, I tried to keep peace for Jeremy's sake. But 2 weeks ago, everything exploded when Nolan called Jeremy for a private talk. Apparently, Elaine had told them that I threatened to get her thrown out of the house. This never happened. Yes, I had complained to Jeremy about her behavior, but I never threatened to kick her out. But Nolan and Patricia believed her without question. They started pressuring Jeremy to divorce me, claiming I was mentally abusing their pregnant daughter. They said I was jealous of Elaine's pregnancy, I'm not even trying to get pregnant yet, and that I was trying to isolate Jeremy from his family. Nolan even brought up how his friend's son's marriage ended because of a toxic wife, and he didn't want Jeremy to suffer the same fate. I expected Jeremy to defend me strongly against these ridiculous accusations. Instead, he came home that night and suggested that maybe I should go stay with my parents for a few weeks until things cool down. He said it would give everyone some space to process their emotions. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own husband wanted me to leave our home because his family couldn't handle their daughter's emotional manipulation. I got really angry and told Jeremy he needed to decide whether he was a husband first or a son first. I reminded him how I had supported him when he was starting his business, how I had always respected his family despite their interference in our marriage, and how I had never complained when he spent every Sunday at his parents' house even though I wanted to spend time alone with him. He tried to explain that he wasn't taking sides and just wanted peace in the family. That's when I realized he was never going to stand up to his family. I packed my bags and left for my parents' house. I told him I wouldn't return until he showed some backbone, and stood up to his family's ridiculous demands. My parents completely support my decision. My dad says Jeremy needs to learn that marriage means choosing your spouse over anyone else when they're being unfairly attacked. My mom thinks Elaine is acting out because she's insecure about her own marriage situation. My best friend pointed out how Elaine's behavior changed only after she got pregnant, suggesting she might be jealous of my stable relationship with Jeremy while her husband is far away. But some of our mutual friends think I overreacted. They say I should have been more patient since Elaine is pregnant and emotional. Some suggest that I should have tried harder to make peace with her for Jeremy's sake. One friend even said that leaving might make me look guilty of the things Elaine accused me of. It's been a week since I left, and Jeremy hasn't called even once. He texted me the day after I left saying he needs time to think things through. I haven't responded because I believe he needs to figure out his priorities on his own. I love him, but I can't be with someone who won't defend me against his family's false accusations. I keep checking my phone hoping he'll call and tell me he talked to his parents and sister, but so far there's been nothing but silence. I'm starting to wonder if this marriage can be saved, or if I'm fighting a losing battle against a family that's determined to break us apart. Am I wrong for leaving? Should I have stayed and tried harder to make peace with Elaine? I really need some outside perspective on this situation. Update 1. I never thought I would be writing this update. The situation has gotten so much worse than I could have imagined. After 3 weeks of complete silence from Jeremy, literally not a single call or message except that one text saying he needed time, I received divorce papers in the mail yesterday. I was completely shocked because even though things were bad, I never thought Jeremy would take such a drastic step without even trying to talk things through. I spent the whole night crying and trying to make sense of everything. My parents were furious when they saw the papers. My dad wanted to go confront Jeremy immediately, but I asked him to let me handle it. I couldn't accept that my husband would end our marriage this way, so I decided to drive to his house this morning to confront him about this cowardly move. When I reached there, I got the biggest shock of my life. Jeremy's ex-girlfriend Andrea was sitting comfortably on our couch, dressed like she lived there. Some background about Andrea: she dated Jeremy for 3 years in college before they broke up because she cheated on him with his then best friend. The breakup was really messy and Jeremy was devastated. He had told me he never wanted to see her face again. Yet there she was, in our house, acting like she belonged there. I was so stunned that for a moment I just stood there staring. Elaine was sitting across from her, and they were laughing about something like old friends. When they noticed me, Elaine's expression changed to one of fake concern while Andrea just looked smug. Jeremy came out of the kitchen and froze when he saw me. I demanded an explanation from him about both the divorce papers and why his cheating ex was in our house. He just stood there looking guilty and mumbled something about reconnecting with old friends and getting clarity about our relationship. That's when I noticed how comfortable Andrea seemed in our house, like she had been there many times before. While I was trying to process this betrayal, Elaine started making snide comments about how some people just can't take hints and show up uninvited. I ignored her and focused on Jeremy, asking him if he had been seeing Andrea while I was away. His silence and guilty expression said everything. Nolan came downstairs during this confrontation and had the audacity to defend the situation. He said they had run into Andrea at a family friend's party 2 weeks ago, and she had really changed since college. According to him, she was now more mature and understood family values better than me. He even suggested that maybe this was a sign that Jeremy should give her another chance. Something snapped inside me at that moment. Without saying a word, I took out the divorce papers from my bag and signed them right there on our coffee table, the same table we had picked out together when we first moved in. I told Jeremy he was pathetic for letting his family destroy our marriage and for going back to someone who had publicly humiliated him by cheating on him. Patricia tried to intervene, saying I was being dramatic and they were just trying to help Jeremy make the right decision. I laughed and asked her if the right decision was to push her son back to a woman who had cheated on him just because she couldn't handle her daughter's emotional manipulation. That's when things got really ugly. Elaine started crying, again, saying I was traumatizing her and causing stress to her baby. Andrea tried to act like the bigger person by saying she didn't want to cause any drama. I told her she should have thought about that before inserting herself into a married man's life. After I left, I got calls from several of our mutual friends. Apparently, this whole thing had been in motion for weeks. Andrea had been in contact with Elaine for months through social media. They had planned this whole thing together. Elaine would create problems between Jeremy and me, convince her parents I was toxic, and then they would reintroduce Andrea into Jeremy's life as a supportive friend who understands family values. Some friends even revealed that during these 3 weeks of silence, Jeremy had been going out with Andrea regularly. They were seen together at restaurants and movies while I was sitting at my parents' house hoping he would come to his senses. What makes me feel like a complete fool is that I actually defended him when my parents suggested he might be seeing someone else. But here's the worst part: I found out last week that I'm pregnant. I had been feeling unwell and took a test, which came back positive. I was actually planning to tell Jeremy once he came around and stood up to his family. I had even bought a cute little onesie to surprise him with the news. Now that onesie is in the trash, along with all my hopes for our future together. I haven't told anyone except my parents about the pregnancy yet. My mom thinks I should tell Jeremy about it, but I don't want to. Part of me wants to tell him just to see his face when he realizes what he's throwing away, but a bigger part of me wants to keep my child far away from him and his toxic family. I don't want my baby growing up around people who think it's okay to destroy relationships and manipulate people. Right now, I'm focusing on taking care of myself and my baby. I've already contacted a divorce lawyer who specializes in parental rights. I plan to fight for full custody and make sure Jeremy has no legal rights to our child. He made his choice when he chose his manipulative family and cheating ex over his wife, and I'll make sure he lives with the consequences of that choice. I still can't believe how quickly everything fell apart, but at least now I know what kind of person Jeremy really is, a weak man who can't think for himself and lets his family control his life. Maybe someday I'll thank Elaine for showing me his true colors before I wasted more years of my life with him. Update 2. Life really has a way of serving justice when you least expect it. Yesterday, I received several missed calls from Jeremy. At first, I ignored them as I have been doing for the past year, but then he started texting me saying he desperately needed to talk. He was crying and begging to meet me. Initially, I refused, but curiosity got the better of me, so I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near my workplace. When I saw him, I barely recognized him. The once well-dressed, confident man now looked shabby and defeated. He had lost weight, his clothes were wrinkled, and he looked like he hadn't slept properly in days. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. What he told me was both shocking and satisfying. Apparently, Elaine had been plotting with their parents all along. After our divorce was finalized, they started working on their next plan. They convinced Jeremy that Elaine needed more security since her husband was overseas. They said putting the house in her name would help her feel more stable during her pregnancy. Like the fool he is, Jeremy agreed. He signed over the property to Elaine without even consulting a lawyer. Andrea, who had moved in with him by then, supported this decision, saying it showed how much he cared about family. Jeremy thought everything was perfect: he had his supportive girlfriend, his happy family, and his sister was secure. But things started changing as soon as the house was in Elaine's name. First, Elaine began complaining about how cramped the house felt with so many people. She said her baby needed more space and suggested Jeremy and Andrea should find their own place. When Jeremy said they couldn't afford a new place immediately, Andrea started picking fights with him. She complained about living with his family, about his reduced income since he had given away his biggest asset, and about how he wasn't the successful man she thought he was. When Jeremy suggested they move to a smaller apartment, she left him. She said she couldn't be with someone who couldn't provide a proper home and lifestyle. The final blow came last week. Elaine and his parents told him he needed to move out because they needed his room for the baby. When he reminded them it was supposed to be his house, Elaine coldly told him that legally, it was her house now and she could do whatever she wanted. His own parents supported her, saying he needed to understand that a baby's needs come first. Now he's staying at some cheap motel, surviving on his savings since most of his money went into renovating the house for Elaine's baby. He begged me to forgive him and let him stay at my parents' house. He said he had realized his mistake and wanted to make things right. Then he dropped the bomb. He knew about our baby and wanted to be there for our child. Apparently, one of our mutual friends had told him about my pregnancy a few months ago. He claimed he had been trying to gather courage to reach out ever since. He said he understood now how toxic his family was and how they had manipulated him into destroying his life. I laughed in his face. I told him he lost all rights to our child when he chose his manipulative family and cheating ex over us. I reminded him how he hadn't even tried to contact me during my pregnancy, how he had signed away his parental rights in the divorce settlement without even reading the papers, and how he had let his family destroy everything we had built together. He started crying, saying he would do anything to be part of his child's life. He even offered to sign a formal apology admitting how he had wronged me. I told him he should have thought about all this before going back to his cheating ex and letting his family control his life. Before leaving, I told him that this was karma. He lost his house to his manipulative sister just like he lost his wife to his family's manipulation. The only difference was that I had chosen to walk away, while he had been thrown away. Some might think I'm being too harsh, but I feel no sympathy for him. He made his choices, and now he has to live with them. My baby and I are doing perfectly fine without him, and that's how it's going to stay. Update 3. It's been an eventful 6 months since my last update. Jeremy has been relentlessly trying to get legal rights to see our baby. He hired a lawyer and filed for partial custody, claiming he had made a mistake by signing away his rights and deserved a second chance to be a father. My lawyer says he has virtually no chance of succeeding. Not only did he abandon us during pregnancy and sign away his parental rights in the divorce settlement, but he also failed to provide any financial support during the entire pregnancy and first year of our daughter's life. The judge is unlikely to look favorably on a father who only showed interest in his child after losing everything else. Jeremy even sent his friends to convince me. Some tried guilt-tripping me, saying every child needs a father. Others suggested I was being vindictive and using my daughter to punish Jeremy. One friend even implied I was no better than Elaine since I was keeping a father from his child. I cut contact with anyone who tried to defend him. But karma wasn't done with Jeremy's family yet. Last month, Mark, Elaine's husband, finally found out everything that happened. Apparently, Elaine and his family had been feeding him a completely different story. They told him I had tried to steal the house from them and Jeremy had nobly sacrificed his property to help his pregnant sister. When Mark discovered the truth during his recent visit home, he was furious. He couldn't believe his wife had manipulated her own brother out of his house and contributed to destroying his marriage. He confronted Elaine and her parents about their actions, but they tried to justify everything, saying they did it for the baby's security. Mark is now filing for divorce and fighting for full custody of their 3-month-old son. He's using Elaine's manipulation of Jeremy as evidence of her unstable behavior. He says he doesn't want his son growing up around people who think it's okay to destroy families and steal from their own blood. As for me, my daughter is now 15 months old and she's absolutely perfect. My parents have been incredibly supportive, helping me balance work and motherhood. We recently moved to a new city for a better job opportunity, putting even more distance between us and Jeremy's toxic family. I heard through mutual friends that Jeremy is still struggling. He's living in a small studio apartment and working extra shifts to pay his legal fees. Nolan and Patricia tried to help him financially, but he refused their money. At least he finally grew a spine, even if it's too late. Elaine has been trying to reach out to me through fake social media accounts, probably hoping I'll testify in her favor for her custody battle. I've blocked every account and documented her attempts to contact me in case I need it for my own legal battle with Jeremy. Some people from our old social circle still think I'm being too harsh by not letting Jeremy see his daughter. They say people change and deserve second chances. But I believe some betrayals are too deep to forgive. Jeremy didn't just abandon me, he abandoned his unborn child and chose his toxic family over us. Those aren't the qualities I want in my daughter's father. My daughter will never know Jeremy or his family, and I'm at peace with that decision. She'll grow up surrounded by people who truly love her and would never manipulate or betray her. Sometimes that's better than having a full but toxic family. Life has a funny way of coming full circle. Jeremy lost his house trying to provide security for his sister's baby, and now both of them might lose custody of their children. Meanwhile, my daughter and I are thriving in our new life. I guess sometimes burning bridges isn't such a bad thing after all.